And now we have an extended conversation with Dr. Bandy Lee.
Dr. Lee, what do you make of his affinity for dictators around the world? He envies them, he
Yes.
praises them, he covers for them, and he even alienates some of the traditional allies that we have in Western Europe. What's your take on that?
Well, he is a tyrant wannabe himself. And of course, he would be drawn to those who work the same way as he does, have the same desires, and are actually more effective at realizing their desires. It's a complex psychological attraction that works like lock and key. Former CIA profiler Dr. Gerald Post recently wrote a book about that, and he wrote a chapter for our book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, in that Trump and his followers have a psychological structure that they yearn for each other and they fit each other like lock and key. It's actually, most of the time when we think of tyrants or strongmen, we think of them as authority figures, but it's actually a very submissive personality type where you are looking for an ideal figure who will satisfy your needs, for someone who will take charge and someone you can follow. It comes from the lack of proper parenting. But when you're put in that position, like Donald Trump has been, you puff yourself up and claim that you are that figure, the stable genius who is an expert in everything, and only I can take care of all the problems. And then people in their wounded yearning for this type of figure are immediately attracted to such a person in ways that it would never work for a normal person. Normal people don't so yearn desperately for a strong leader that they don't see through someone who's saying, I alone can fix it. That actually means I'm being deceptive in some way, because no person who is capable of fixing things would say that. But those who are wounded and unable because of their yearnings and their fears and other psychological mechanisms can't see that, are actually attracted to these figures.
How about this for a silver lining for Donald Trump's narcissism and ego? Everybody knows he wants to dominate the news cycle 24/7. I mean, he gets up in the middle of the night and tweets in order to distract attention from something that might be in the news unfavorable to him. He wants to dominate the news cycle. He doesn't like to get involved in details. He doesn't like to engage anything that might take attention from him. So doesn't that argue that he is less likely to initiate a war like the, quote, traditional George W. Bush and Dick Cheney did in their criminal war in Iraq and elsewhere? That if he did, he would lose control of the news cycle. He would lose control of the focus on him. And you have to get involved in quagmires and details that he doesn't like to do. So while he's continued Obama's drone attacks and his special forces adventures in various countries, his very personality, his ego, would not lead him to get us involved into a major war. Your take?
Well, that's still thinking rationally. His psychological structure would not be that way. In fact, look at what he almost did in Iran in the middle of June when he ordered an attack. He quickly stepped back, but also look at what happened to the Kurds, how he unleashed Turkish forces on our allies and easily gave away dominance over the region to our enemies. So his reasoning will be, yes, it will be more on the side of non-action as far as he can afford it. Most violent individuals are actually cowards. They're usually fearful. And so most of the time it looks like that fear will deter. And also, as long as he's able to appear like the peace-promoting person, and there's great longing in the population for peace. But once people see through him and he's no longer able to attain adulation through these means, of course he will go straight to aggressive tactics. And his negative attention is far better than no attention. So even if he were to be dubbed the villain for causing a war or the most atrocious, well, if he can't be the best and expert in everything, he would rather be the greatest villain in history. So no action can be considered too outlandish in terms of possibilities for this president.
Do you think the dictator of North Korea is more stable personality than Donald Trump as they interact with each other?
I haven't studied him enough, but the two are very similar. The two show extremely similar traits. In fact, they seem to be of the same structure, and that explains the love fest that they have been having, but it can also explain the very precarious and speedy, without warning, launch of war against each other, which seems to be starting.
Let me suggest something else just to try to see more granularly. He almost never smiles. In fact, if you took 1,000 pictures in the news of Donald Trump, not more than 2 or 3 would have him smile, for example, at an egg roll at the White House with kids. The second, he almost never appears with Barron, his 13-year-old son. In fact, he referred to Barron as Melania's son. Do you read anything in those two characteristics?
Well, these are complex questions. But first of all, he never smiles. Yes, you're right. What we see are smirks, usually, not smiles. Well, he's a miserable human being. Most of the pleasure he attains is actually from cruelty against others, and that cruelty is a well-recognized cruelty. It usually happens with sadistic individuals because they are envious of other human beings. They lack basic human qualities, and so they sense that lack, and so they will go after pretty much any human being. Tormenting them, sometimes destroying them, gives them pleasure because they have qualities that they lack. In terms of his relationship with Barron, well, he's lacking many of those intimate human emotions. He doesn't have empathy or a conscience, and so relating to other people requires, or pleasure from relating to other people requires, some empathy. He either sees everyone as an extension of himself, and either you work for him or you don't, you bring him benefits or you don't, and that's how he uses you, and rather than deriving pleasure from relating to you. So unless you're able to be of service to him, there's no reason for him to interact with anyone. And Barron, being a child, is of very little use.